Excellent, definitely, because like I've mentioned earlier, Dr. Milton has actually a vast collection of experience that we are definitely looking forward to having him share his experience with us. Being an expert in the lab analysis as well as enzyme nutrition, basically Dr. Milton has actually led several major clinical studies. As you can see from the slide right now, he has actually led a couple of clinical studies that has been very well recognized. Effects on nutrition, enzyme therapy, as well as protease on inflammation. So his current focus right now is to develop specific treatment protocols depending on biochemical individuals of the patients so as to help them achieve and maintain optimum health through a holistic and integrative approach. And we are definitely honored to have him here with us this morning to share with us all that he has garnered over these years. And so without further ado, I think we have actually lost quite a bit of time earlier. I'd like to hand the session over to Dr. Milton right now so that he can bring us through his presentation. Dr. Milton?
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. And I do apologize for that technical glitch there. I'm not very tech savvy. So let's go ahead and get started. I know the subject of this series of seminars that you are holding in Thailand is the essential role of functional food and supplements in post-COVID-19 healthcare. And what we've experienced over here is, in the beginning, a lot of chaos, a lot of turmoil, but us at the holistic side and the alternative side really had to go back and dig into physiology, biochemistry, and the role of food, nutrition, and supplements played in our physiology and biochemistry. Seeing that at the beginning, there was no there wasn't really a guide as to how to combat this situation that came upon us so abruptly. We had to rely on our critical thinking, and we had to rely on our knowledge of basic fundamental nutrition and wellness, and kind of seeing how to support the immune system in ways that we hadn't thought of before. The only thing that has held true from the beginning of time till now is that any health challenge that can come upon us, including, things like viral load or pathogenic bacteria or underlying gut infection, anything that comes our way, the only thing that could really, really play in our favor is our immune system. And we have to figure out ways, especially in this era, that in the beginning, like I said, in the beginning of this pandemic, there really wasn't any answer as to how to combat this. So the immune system is the only thing we had to rely on. And that immune system can either play a favorable role for us or an unfavorable role for us. So we have to figure out what are the things that your immune system recognizes as friends. What are the things that your immune system recognizes as enemies? And we have to learn how to support that immune system so that it can protect us from anything that comes our way. So enzymes, I find, which has been the focus of my studies in the last 10 years, that it is a favorable and most powerful aid we could have to support our immune system. And some learning objectives we have today are, learning what are enzymes and why are they necessary. We're going to learn a little bit about cellular health and its importance to preventing disease. We're going to briefly discuss some triggers that turn on the immune response, discuss some cellular mechanisms of inflammation through the NF-kappa beta pathway, which ultimately leads to a change of cell function. learn how enzymes play a role in helping gut dysfunction and supporting the immune system, a foundational approach to wellness through enzyme therapy, and some general application of enzyme supplementation. Now, if I only had one choice of a supplement to choose, if they told me, Dr. Bastidas, all you have in toolbox is one supplement that you can use, what would that be? And without a doubt, I would choose enzymes. The reason being is that enzymes are not just for digestive support. Now, in my beginning years of clinical practice, I was taught that enzymes helped us digest our food, digest our proteins, our carbohydrates, our lipids, but that's as far as it went. It was until later on that I came to play a role in the Transformation Enzyme Corporation that I started learning the many more functions that enzymes really do for us. And one of the biggest ones is supporting the immune system. Now, it doesn't matter if it's COVID-19, it doesn't matter if it's cancer, it doesn't matter if it's autoimmune. All those conditions I just mentioned has one thing in common, and that is inflammation. So if we look at what we're dealing with as inflammation, and we learn that enzymes help our immune system, support our immune system, and have anti-inflammatory properties, then we can apply these enzymes to any condition, including post-COVID healthcare, including in times of COVID acute clinical presentations, because we know that COVID brings about an inflammatory condition. It brings about a cytokine storm, and we're going to learn how enzymes are able to quench the immune system, modulate the immune system, and help us in dealing with a cytokine storm, and help us with dealing with inflammation. So remember, everything that walks through our door that has a name put on it, like I said, it could be cardiovascular disease, it could be diabetes, it could be autoimmune disease. They all have one thing in common, and that is inflammation. So what I'm going to try to show you is how enzymes play a role in supporting the immune system and modulating inflammation so that any condition that walks through our door, including today's topic, which is post-COVID healthcare, even that you can support with enzymes. So why we need enzyme support? Okay, so you see, enzyme therapy plays a vital role in nutrient acquisition and delivery of nutrients to the cell. Yes, we all make enzymes, but over time, your body's ability to produce enzymes declines. You actually start to lose about 10% of your enzyme production every decade once you pass age 30. You have 30 trillion cells in your body, and it requires approximately 20,000 enzymes to keep just one cell alive and well. As you can see, enzymes make life possible. They are needed for every chemical reaction that occurs in our body. Without them, no activity would take place. Vitamins, minerals, hormones, etc., can't work without enzymes. Enzymes are the labor force that builds your body, just like construction workers are the labor force that builds your house. You may have all of the necessary building materials and lumber, but to build a house, you need workers, which represent the vital life elements. And that's what enzymes do for us. They're like the construction workers that are building, and helping us with every cellular need. Okay, it takes nutrients to the cells. It helps in cellular structure and function, and it helps with cellular communication. So these are some of the reasons why we need enzymes. So the need for nutrition and enzymes has never been greater. Today, we are finding that the need for better nutrition and enzyme therapy grows day by day. See, your body produces digestive enzymes. However, it cannot produce enough digestive enzymes to keep up with the typical, at least over here on my side of the world, the typical Western diet, which is full of enzyme depleted, cooked and processed foods. Things like GMOs and pesticides are also wreaking havoc on our digestive system capabilities. Stress also plays a big role in our natural digestive enzyme production. Our environments are even more toxic now than ever before. Then there's genetic factors that influence the development of our digestive system. Not to mention, majority of people are not chewing their food, and that alone impairs digestion. So anytime you have impaired digestion, you're not going to have broken down food particles. And the main components that trigger an immune reaction are undigested proteins. So just by not eating properly, chewing our food properly, and digesting our food properly, we're going to introduce into our circulation some undigested proteins that could trigger an immune reaction. And anytime you have an immune reaction, guess what you have? You have inflammation. So remember, inflammation, while it's natural and we need it, it can also become not beneficial to our system, because chronic prolonged inflammation can become toxic to our body. So this picture illustrates the biochemical and physical organization of the body. Now, let's start at the beginning. Before we were human beings, we started out as molecules or atoms. 96% of our body is made up of basic elements. For example, oxygen, carbon, hydrogen, and nitrogen. And from those elements, we create cells. We are made up of about 30 trillion cells, and those cells have various functions depending on where they are located. Our cells make 4 tissues. That's connective tissue, muscular tissue, epithelial tissue, and nervous tissue. And from these tissues, we grow various organs, such as your brain, lungs, heart, stomach, spleen, liver, intestines, etc. And those organs combine, and from there, we create systems. This is the basic organization of our body, these 11 systems, as you can see: nervous, cardiovascular, lymphatic, endocrine, reproductive, muscular, skeletal, digestive, respiratory, skin, urinary. And these systems are supported by the function of enzymes, whether it be digestive enzymes or metabolic enzymes. So the cells needs nutrients or it dies. The human cell is a basic fundamental unit of life. The cell requires nutrients to complete the various jobs required by our bodies. The human cell is the source of the body's energy supply, and our energy production comes from the nutrients that are delivered to our cells. When our cells are healthy, we are healthy. And when our cells are sick, we get sick. It is so important to remember, you are not what you eat. You are what you digest, assimilate, and fail to eliminate. So, feeding the 11 systems of the body the nutrition they need to thrive is step 1 in any healing journey. In order to disarm any disease-triggering mechanism, that structural and functional integrity must be maintained and or restored via nutrition. Digestive and proteolytic enzyme therapy, along with probiotics, are necessary for optimal nutrient acquisition, adequate circulation, and a healthy GI tract. These are critical factors needed to ensure tissue integrity and help restore health, irrespective of therapy adopted. Digestive formulas will provide you with nutrient bioavailability and cellular health and vitality while supporting the immune system and helping to reduce oxidative stress and also help with reduction of food intolerances. Proteolytic formulas keep the circulation going for nutrient delivery and also help with the formation of red blood cells, white blood cells, helps with reducing inflammation and removal of toxins. And of course, probiotics help support digestion and production of enzymes, reduce pathogenic activity, and promote the removal of toxins and waste. Now, this is all very important because remember, whatever we don't digest properly can trigger an immune reaction. And if we don't eliminate things properly, that can also trigger an immune reaction, which combined will create inflammation. And remember, the common denominator of everything that walks through our door as signs and symptoms have something to do with inflammation. So what we see here is all the symptoms related to disruption of the GI tract. This is what we refer to as the ripple effect of digestion and disease. The outermost circle represents the presented illness, which is these guys out here. Okay, this is the presented illness. But what triggers all these symptoms and conditions is a poor digestive tract. Okay, so the inner circle represents where the disease begins or where problems begin that lead to the disease. Okay, so here, poor digestion will result in disease. Poorly digested carbohydrates ferment in the colon. This provides food for harmful microorganisms to consume this, which results in increased gases, which can overwhelm our system and contribute to more toxicity and inflammation. Poorly digested fats will turn rancid in the large intestine. Toxins in the colon are absorbed into the bloodstream where they are oxidized and can become free radicals, inducing more inflammation. Poorly digested proteins putrefy in the colon. Microorganisms consume this, which results in, you got it, toxicity. So as you can see, poor digestion right here in the innermost circle leads to toxicity. Okay, so remember this when I get to the foundation, and the reason we have a digestive, proteolytic, and probiotic. Okay, whatever system is weakest is the one that will usually go out of balance first. Okay, so poor digestion, again, inner circle, leads to toxicity. That toxicity triggers an immune reaction, which leads to inflammation. And that inflammation will begin an imbalance, okay, the outermost circle. Now, imbalance where? Well, depending on your genetic predisposition, that imbalance can express itself. It will have a phenotypic expression in one or many or all of these systems, okay? It could express itself in the cardiovascular system, leading to bad circulation, high blood pressure, increased or hyperlipidemia, inflammation. It could affect the digestive system, which can turn into allergies, candida, IBS, inflammatory bowel disease, leaky gut. It could express itself in the endocrine system, leading to premenstrual syndrome, menopause, adrenal fatigue, thyroid disorder. It could go into the lymphatic system to bring some autoimmune allergies, infections. So it could, depending on the patient's genetic predisposition and it's the patient's weakest system, this poor digestion that leads to toxicity, which ultimately creates inflammation and will ultimately create an imbalance in one or many of all these systems. That's when the patient comes in saying, "Doc, I feel XYZ." It's usually a lot of symptoms that they are feeling. They never come in saying, "I only feel, I'm only suffering with a rash." No, it's usually a rash, pain, stiffness. It's usually a lot of things people are suffering with. It's usually never not one symptom alone. And it usually doesn't happen overnight. It usually happens with long, prolonged periods of chronic and silent inflammation. Okay, so this is the basic concept that we believe in over here at Transformation is poor digestion leads to toxicity, creates inflammation, and leads to an imbalance in one or many of the systems of the body. Okay, and like a wise fellow said thousands of years ago, all disease begins in the gut. Okay, which today we're seeing more and more of that play out, and for a good reason. 80% of our immune system lies around the gut, the gastrointestinal lining. Okay, with good reason, because your gastrointestinal tract is the interface between the external environment and our internal system. So it has to be solid. It has to be have high integrity so that undigested proteins and toxins don't enter into the circulation. Now, what I'm going to show you next is a little video we produced at Transformation that will kind of put this into perspective. And let me know if you guys are able to see this video.
Yes, we can see it fine.
Okay, so what we have here is a piece of food going through the intestinal lumen, okay? And that food is then, when we look inside the lumen, and let me stop the video here, we have here our gastrointestinal lining. And as you can see, it's supposed to be tight junctions, impermeable to big molecules, okay? It will only allow in small molecules, small nutrients, amino acids, lipids, carbohydrates, and it will not allow these big undigested particles, which could be proteins, it could be pathogens, it could be microorganisms that are not supposed to go into our intestinal lining, okay? Now, let's continue playing here. So this gastrointestinal lining is supposed to be nice and solid, tight junctions. The villi are nice and big. And now we see a dysfunctional gut. As you can see now, not only small nutrients are making its way in, but also large undigested particles are making its way in. And these large undigested particles, if something makes it into the circulation through the gastrointestinal tract that is bigger than 5 kilodaltons, it usually triggers an immune reaction. Remember, the immune system, 80% of our immune system lies around this gastrointestinal tract. So down here, when this big undigested particle makes it into the circulation, which is down here, we're going to have some immune cells come over and try to identify that undigested particle as a foodstuff, as a nutrient, or if it doesn't recognize it as a nutrient, it's going to think it's an intruder, a pathogen, pathogenic bacteria or a lipopolysaccharide, and it's going to create an immune reaction. And that immune system is going to bring in more immune cells to create inflammation. So let's continue this video. And as you can see, now the intestinal lining has lost its integrity. It's porous. The villi is also atrophied. Big protein particles are making it into the circulation. And we'll see next what happens as we keep rolling the video. Our next slide is going to now show when those undigested particles make it into the circulation. We see here, these are nutrients, these are blood cells, these are undigested particles that made it into the circulation. And here is a white blood cell. Okay, this is your immune system now coming over and trying to identify, okay, this is a nutrient. Okay, this is not a nutrient. This is something that's too big to be in here. It could be an intruder. So what are we going to do? We're going to, boom, we're going to tag it. See, now the white blood cells are all over that big undigested particle. And these white blood cells are going to start the inflammatory cascade. It's going to bring over some more white blood cells. It's going to bring over some macrophages. It's going to bring, and it's going to start signaling for pro-inflammatory cytokines to begin. And the ultimate end product, the ultimate thing that happens, the consequence is inflammation. Okay, so this is one way through a dysfunctional gastrointestinal tract. This is one way inflammation starts being created in our internal system by a dysfunctional gut. And that's where Hippocrates said over 2,000 years ago that all disease begins in the gut, and for good reason. And this is the way it gets started. Okay, so that's a little video we produced over here at Transformation to show how that dysfunctional gastrointestinal lining is part of the inflammatory process. So what we see here again is the ripple effect. Okay, and let's go back and go over this one more time. Impaired digestion, okay, gut dysfunction, the video I showed you, digestion is not happening as it should. That then those undigested particles, those undigested proteins make it into the circulation, creating toxicity. Okay, your immune system goes and starts tagging those undigested proteins, and that creates inflammation. That inflammation creates an imbalance where, depending on the patient's genetic predisposition, its weakest link, it will create an imbalance and express itself in either the cardiovascular system, the digestive system, endocrine system, lymphatic, muscular, nervous, urinary, skin, skeletal, respiratory, reproductive, one or many of these. And that's when we start seeing all these kinds of symptoms come about. Okay, so one way impaired digestion or dysfunctional gut creates inflammation is by this diagram. Increased toxicity, increased inflammation, increased imbalance. Okay, so what we did to show how digestive enzymes play a role in correcting this gut dysfunction, we did a little observatory study at Transformation with the effects of nutrition and enzyme therapy on gastrointestinal dysfunction. Now remember, the common denominator is what? Inflammation. Okay, whether it comes from a disruptive intestinal lining, or whether it comes from a virus, or whether it comes from a fungal infection, whatever it is, inflammation is the biggest driver of that condition. Okay, cancer as well, autoimmune, the biggest driver of those conditions are increased inflammation, chronic inflammation. So the little study that we did was to show how by correcting gut dysfunction through nutrition and enzyme therapy, we were going to show a decrease of the participants' symptoms. Okay, and let's go over what we did. What we did was we gave our foundational protocol, which addresses digestion, the first inner circle, toxicity, the second circle, and inflammation, the third circle. And we did it through a digestive supplement, a probiotic, and a proteolytic supplement. Okay, and we saw improvement in the musculoskeletal system, the endocrine, reproductive, respiratory, urinary, skin, nervous, immune, digestive, and cardiovascular systems. Okay, so I'm going to go over what we saw. So what we did was we looked for 10 to 20 participants, and the symptoms that we had noted was things such as abdominal pain, respiratory congestion, skin issues, chronic pain, frequent infections. And what we did was we accepted 14 participants. 12 began the study, 9 completed the study before and after the testing. We also did some comprehensive baseline data collection of these patients. We took a comprehensive symptom survey, which asked about 100 questions on do you experience headaches? Do you have abdominal pain? Do you have joint stiffness? So it's about 100 symptoms, and the participants would answer 0 for no, I never have this symptom. 1, yeah, yes, I have this symptom, mild symptom, very sporadic. A number 2 would be yes, I have this symptom at a moderate level and frequently. And number 3 would be yes, I have this symptom constantly and severe. So that comprehensive symptom survey, we made those participants fill it out. We also did a body composition assessment to see what the enzymes would do to their body composition, if they would lose fat, if they would increase muscle. We also did a lymphocyte reactivity assessment by ELISA Act. It's a food sensitivity assay, which checks for lymphocytic reactions to about 315 items that included foods, heavy metals, environmental allergens, food coloring, and food preservatives. So it's a blood test that reacted every 315 items worth of nutrients and heavy metals and colorings and preservatives and things of that nature. We also did an antigen test to the proteins within the gastrointestinal lining. You know, in the gastrointestinal lining, in the tight junctions, we have tight junction proteins. And those we measured to see if there was any antibodies against those. Things like zonulin, occludin, and actomyosin. We checked for antibodies to see if there was any type of gastrointestinal lining impermeability. We also did a stool analysis to check for good intestinal flora and any underlying pathogenic infection. We did an intestinal permeability with lactulose and mannitol urine test. And then we did a complete blood panel. And what we used for this was, again, a digestive formula, a proteolytic formula, and a probiotic, okay? We did, the protocol was through nutrition, we gave them a accepted food list. And the accepted food list was pretty much things such as all organic. They could only eat natural whole foods with no preservatives, no GMOs. This included a 14-day meal plan. We put some daily menus in there to help the participants in what foods to choose. We gave them recipes and also a journal for them to fill out. Now, the protocol with the enzymes, which is the foundational protocol, it's digestive enzymes and proteolytic enzymes with every meal, digestive support following every meal, and a proteolytic enzymes and probiotics at bedtime. So that was the protocol we gave those participants. What we saw in the baseline symptom survey was that 93% of our participants had digestive disorders, which were such things such as gas, bloating, constipation, diarrhea. 71% of them had skin disorders, 57% had allergies, 57% had hormonal imbalance, 50% had pain, 50% had headaches, 43% had chronic fatigue syndrome, 29% had immunity issues with frequent infections and some autoimmune we saw in there. Some had mood swings, weight issues, brain fog, memory loss. We had 14% had hair loss, and the other 7% were miscellaneous, things like poor sleep, asthma, heart health, vertigo, and unhealthy aging. So the results of our comprehensive symptom survey, and mind you, if you need to see the full study, we could provide that to you through Transformation. We'll have it over to TechZymes, and they could give you all the testing that we did and the results we got. What I'm showing you is a summary of what we found. And these are some of the participants that were in the study, okay? And these are the number of symptoms that these participants had. In the beginning, this participant had 102 symptoms. 96 of those 102 symptoms improved. So that gave a 94% improvement. Now remember, all we did was give them a clean, healthy diet. So food, right? It's the most basic thing. Food, like our webinar today is called Essential Role of Functional Food and Supplements in Post-COVID Healthcare. Okay, we're talking about inflammation. We're talking about things that are rampant and very, very high in things such as a COVID attack, as chronic inflammation in, let's say, autoimmune, in diabetes, et cetera, et cetera. So this first patient, again, out of 102 symptoms, 96 of those improved. That's 94% improvement. The second patient, 71 symptoms in the beginning, 62 of those symptoms improved. That's an 87% improvement. And you could see there was 86, 85, 67, 52, 51, 31, and 15%. So for the most part, we saw very huge improvement in most of those participants. And like I said, by decreasing inflammation, by allowing your digestive tract to regain its integrity, we are preventing undigested proteins to enter into the circulation, eliciting an immune response and preventing inflammation to begin. So these enzymes can be viewed as something that will correct gut dysfunction and at the same time quench the immune system and prevent an inflammatory reaction. And remember, I told you in the beginning, there was a zero, number zero, if the patient never experienced a symptom. For example, let's say the question was, do you ever experience abdominal pain after eating? If the patient placed a zero, that means no, they never experienced abdominal pain after eating. If they placed a number one, then yes, a mild, occasional abdominal pain after eating. A number two would be yes, moderate pain frequently after eating. And a number three, yes, most of the times, always, constant, and a lot of pain after eating. So the number threes, the most always symptoms in each patient, as you can see in red, the before, and after the study, which was a 63-day study. After 63 days, this patient had this much improvement of the number threes. Okay, this patient had this amount of number threes and improvement here. As you can see, this patient had all the number threes that this patient had, which was about 15. At the end of the study, there was no more number threes. So all the number threes, most always symptoms, the severe symptoms, went down in every single participant, as you can see here, the before and after, okay? The number twos, those symptoms that were often, usually moderate, okay? There was also across the board improvement, as you can see, the before and after. And like I said, if you want to know the symptoms that were recorded, we can also provide those records for you. But this is just to show you that every patient after 63 days of this enzyme protocol with food, all symptoms improved. The severe symptoms, the moderate symptoms as well. Body composition after, this is the before and after, okay, and this is the difference. So body mass in pounds. This patient started at 205 pounds, and after the protocol for 63 days, 185 pounds. So that's a 20-pound difference from beginning to end. And as you can see, all participants lost weight. The one that gained 1 pound was actually muscle mass. She actually put on some muscle on her body composition, giving her a little bit more weight, but in muscle mass. So with body composition assessment, we observed that 8 out of 9 participants lost weight with average weight loss of approximately 7 pounds. 6 of 9 participants showed a decrease in percent fat and an increase in percent fat-free mass. This was a positive correlation between improved nutrient intake and absorption on body composition. And remember, nutrients are what feeds the cells so that the cells can create more cells. They can repair, they could reproduce, they could regenerate, but they need nutrients. And if the nutrients are not getting through the digestive tract completely digested, they will not be completely absorbed and they will not make it to the cell where it's needed. So with enzyme supplementation, you can correct all those dysfunctions. The ELISA ACT test, remember, it's a lymphocytic reaction to about 315 items, which includes foods, heavy metals, artificial colorings, preservatives, and all the participants in the beginning, okay, so in the beginning, all the participants had these amounts of strong reactions. As you can see, this participant, DK, in the beginning had 7 strong reactions, and they were, again, foods, heavy metals, or artificial colors, artificial sweeteners, preservatives, et cetera, et cetera. As you can see, across the board, they all improved. This patient started with 2 strong reactions to 2 items, and at the end had no strong reaction to no items. This one, 7, at the end only had 2 strong reactions. Okay, so across the board, we showed improvements there, and that was to strong reactions. Then there was some moderate reactions because the test results they give you items that gave a strong reaction, which means that in that tube where they placed, for example, egg, if there was more than 50% lymphocytic reaction after a 2-week period of microscopic evaluation on that tube, when there was a more than 50% lymphocytic reproduction, then that means that there was inflammation and that the blood collected from that patient was reacting to that item, okay? If it was less than 50%, then they called it a moderate reaction, okay? As you can see, this patient in the beginning had 15 moderate reactions, and at the end only had 5 moderate reactions, okay? Now, we only tested for 63 days, but the trend was that everybody improved. Everybody improved in the strong reactions and in the moderate reactions, as you can see here. Had we kept going, I am pretty confident that these food reactions would have minimized severely. And the more you minimize food reactions or anything that your immune system is reacting against, the more you quench that reaction, the more improvement you're going to feel in terms of symptoms. Okay, because remember, this is an inflammatory reaction to certain items that the patient was consuming. And after measuring those lymphocytes, when we saw a reduction of the reaction, we also saw an improvement of symptoms. Why? Because we're quenching inflammation. Remember, inflammation is the common denominator. I know I'm talking about food reactions here, but inflammation also occurs in viral infections. And it's that inflammation, that cytokine storm, that your body, depending on the patient's comorbidities, is not able to withstand and could ultimately lead to a life-threatening status. So by quenching inflammation, whether it's from food, whether it's from an infection, you are going to be able to support that immune system. And this is how enzymes do it, by quenching inflammation. And I'm going to show you later on a study that was performed that showed how pro-inflammatory cytokines are decreased by enzyme supplementation. Okay, so this was a Cyrix antigen test. And what you see here is IgA to actomyosin, IgG to occludin zonulin, IgA, IgM to occludin zonulin, and IgG, IgA, and IgM to lipopolysaccharides. Now, these guys right here, actomyosin, occludin, and zonulin, these are gastrointestinal lining proteins that have a role to play in intestinal integrity. When the tight junctions are the way they're supposed to be, then the actomyosin and occludin proteins are functioning well. If you see the intestinal lining loses integrity, then you will start seeing antibodies against those intestinal lining proteins. Lipopolysaccharides are things that are found in the exoskeletons of certain pathogenic microorganisms. And these are things that are also produced by pathogens. And it's very, very offensive to the immune system, and it triggers an immune reaction. So what we're seeing here is a before and after, okay? So this patient for immunoglobulin G of occludin and zonulin started at 1.52, and after the test, after the study, ended at 1.51. So we reduced that antibody load for this gastrointestinal protein. And as you can see, all across the board, the circles are in green. That means there was improvement. This patient for actomyosin antibody immunoglobulin A, before we measured it, was at 2120, and after it went down to a normal 1749. These are the reference ranges for actomyosin IgA. It should be between 0 and 20. You can see this patient was 21, above the reference range, and ended at 17, within the reference range. Okay, so that's how you read this. For occludin, zonulin, IgG, okay, for example, this patient started at 1.18 and ended at 0.47, and the reference range is from 0.2 to 1.5. So if you take a look at that, every single one of them had a reduction in antibodies against gastrointestinal proteins, okay? And these are lipopolysaccharides, which are very offensive to the immune system. And in these patients, we also measured that IgG, IgA, and IgM antibodies. And as you can see, there was a reduction here. There was reduction here. There was a little bit of increase here. And that usually happens when you are degrading lipopolysaccharides. The antibodies tend to go up. But as you degrade them more and more and more, the antibodies start coming down, okay? Because lipopolysaccharides are sugar and fat proteins that come together. They're produced by pathogenic microorganisms. And guess what? Digestive enzymes help in hydrolyzing and degrading these lipids and sugars to its most basic components, okay? And once you degrade them, then the immune system doesn't treat them as intruders or an offense anymore. What we have next is the stool analysis, okay? And we have, we measured predominant bacteria, short-chain fatty acid byproducts, inflammation, immunology, digestion, absorption, yeast and fungi. And from beginning to end, the green shows that it was improved or remained within normal limits. Yellow was no change towards improvement, and red worsened. As you can see across the board, there was more improvement in all of these markers that we measured in a stool test. So what can you expect from this enzyme, probiotic, and nutrition protocol? You can expect radiant skin, weight management, strong immunity, vibrant life, healthy hormones, great digestion, and abundant energy. Now, enzymes, like I said in the beginning, is not just for digestion, okay? enzymes can also cross the gastrointestinal lining intact and go into the circulation and become systemic enzymes. And these systemic enzymes have health benefits and supports our immune system. So I'm going to switch over from the digestive tract over into the circulation in our internal environment and show you how these enzymes are able to help as well. Okay, so like I said, enzymes, they're more than just digestive support. Okay, so now that we covered, like I said, how we can create a solid foundation for nutrient acquisition, which contains all the precursors needed for proper gut function. Let's shift gears a little bit to the ways proteolytic enzymes can be used internally and systemically. Okay, so let's go over some triggers that turn on the immune response. Okay, we have diet, of course, we already talked about, food intolerance, alcohol is also a GI disruptor, GI tract disruptor. People that are intolerant to gluten, that creates an inflammatory process. Processed foods, when your immune system doesn't recognize a food as a food because it has so much processing in it, or when it's a GMO, it thinks it's an intruder and attacks it as an intruder. Okay, stress, we all know how stress is a silent assassin, creates a lot of inflammation. Environment, seasonal allergies, mold at home, smog, toxicity by way of heavy metals, stagnant organs of elimination, such as gallbladder, liver, or renal insufficiency. Remember, if we're not eliminating properly, if your patients are not having a bowel movement at least 1 or 2 times a day, then guess what? That stagnant organ, okay, it's not eliminating, it's full of toxicity. Where do you think that toxicity stays? Well, it doesn't stay in the colon, okay? It gets reabsorbed and it goes back into the circulation. And that toxicity, when it goes into the circulation, it goes everywhere where the circulation goes. And where does the circulation go? From head to toe, okay? So we need to eliminate. Pathogens also trigger an immune response. Viruses, we all know that right now. Bad bacteria, parasites, fungal overgrowth, and biofilm. These enzymes also do great work on biofilm because of the components that the biofilm are made of are fully hydrolyzed by enzymes, okay? And of course, sleep, when you have insomnia, graveyard shifts, poor sleeping habits, that also turns on the immune system. And the way stressors, such as diet, environment, toxicity, pathogens, the way these stressors impact the immune system are by way of the increases the HPA axis, the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. When that is stimulated over and over again, there is an increased cortisol production. With increased cortisol production, prolonged chronic increased cortisol production, that decreases intestinal immunity by way of reducing the secretory IgA production and its regenerative capacity. When that happens, decreased secretory IgA, immunoglobulin A, we reduce that intestinal cap that protects the GI tract. It exposes the GI tract, the tight junction proteins, and it starts irritating it, creates inflammation, becomes porous, and now undigested particles are able to make its way into the circulation. That's what we call leaky gut. Okay, that leaky gut, as I showed you in the video, now big undigested proteins make it into the circulation. The immune system, by way of white blood cells, start tagging those undigested particles to create inflammation. Okay, so leaky gut, inflammation, that also leads to leaky brain. Okay, because the same immune support that you see around the gut is also found in the brain by way of glial cells and astrocytes. But when those get turned on, that blood-brain barrier also becomes compromised, and we have things such as brain fog, memory loss, et cetera, et cetera. So whatever you have going on in the gut, increasing inflammation, you're also going to have some of that go over to the brain because of the gut-brain connection that we all know exists. So let's talk a little bit about the inflammatory cascade. And this is what happens whenever there is inflammation, prolonged inflammation. Okay, we have a cell, and inside the cell, in the cytoplasm, we have a protein called NF-kappa beta. Okay, and this is what starts the inflammatory cascade, the NF-kappa beta protein, which is this molecule right here. Now, we have an offensive signal that goes to the receptor. Okay, let's say this is a pathogen. Let's say this is a virus. Let's say this is a fungal overgrowth. Or let's say this is gluten. Let's say this is an offensive stimulus that goes to this receptor, okay? And guess what? Your cell doesn't like that stimulus, okay? It's an infection, or it's a bug, it's a parasite, it's something that is truly offensive to the cell. So what happens? This NF-kappa beta molecule is inhibited by this protein. When there is a noxious signal, a bad signal to this receptor, these receptors automatically trigger and turn on this metabolic enzyme. This metabolic enzyme phosphorylates this inhibitory protein, as you can see, phosphorylation. When it gets phosphorylized, guess what? It comes off. As you can see, this inhibitory molecule, this is an inhibitory molecule. This is the NF-kappa beta. This inhibitory molecule through this metabolic enzyme gets phosphorylized, taken off, okay? And now we have an active NF-kappa beta. This NF-kappa beta goes inside the nucleus. And inside the nucleus, with some other co-activators and RNA polymerase, a metabolic enzyme, it goes into the response element where nuclear DNA is formed, okay? Turns into messenger RNA. Messenger RNA comes out and it starts producing certain proteins like pro-inflammatory proteins to get rid of this noxious stimuli. So it goes into defense mode by way of this NF-kappa beta. Remember, it goes into the nucleus and it starts creating pro-inflammatory cytokines, okay? And those pro-inflammatory cytokines come out and try to get rid of this noxious stimuli. Now, when this noxious stimuli gets taken off, the cell inhibits the NF-kappa beta protein and inflammation is done. But what if this noxious stimuli is, let's say, an underlying gut infection that has never been diagnosed? Well, this continues to go on day by day, weeks by weeks. What if it's in food intolerance? What if it's a fungal overgrowth? Well, or a lipopolysaccharide, like I said earlier. That stimulus of NF-kappa beta production keeps going on, and inflammation continues, like I said, days, weeks, months, even years or decades. Okay, so this cell, the function of this cell goes from whatever it used to do to now consistently produce pro-inflammatory cytokines to get rid of this noxious stimuli. Okay, so as you can see there, you have changed the cell's function because it keeps producing inflammation to get rid of this. Okay, that prolonged inflammation, it becomes a enemy and it turns against us. That's where autoimmune can be triggered. So now that we've briefly discussed the role of enzymes, the triggers, immune response, and the inflammatory process, let's look at how enzymes can support the immune system in order to give us health benefits. Okay, and this is where it gets really, really cool. And this is where I love these enzymes. So remember, like I said, enzymes are essential for each and every bodily function. They act as biocatalysts and produce big effects with little efforts. They act at multiple sites of the immune system to enhance it and diminish inflammation. They normalize a derailed immune system and hence aid in control and elimination of infection. And as you can see, I've selected some bullets as to how enzymes are more than digestive support. And as we can see here, enzyme therapy has been shown to overcome the cytokine storm. Now, I know you've heard that in the past 2 years, a cytokine storm brought about a viral infection. Well, guess what? This cytokine storm can be overcome by the host immune system by way of proteolytic enzymes hydrolyzing pro-inflammatory cytokines and reducing that cytokine storm. Okay. Enzymes can also cleave the antigenic surface proteins of organisms and digest their outer coat. Wow, that's pretty amazing. So they defunct the pathogens. Okay, and I'm going to show you some examples of how they cleave the antigenic surface proteins of organisms and their outer coat. Okay, they reduce number and activity of receptors for pathogens on host cells. Thus, pathogen attachment is hampered and infectivity decreases. They detoxify blood and remove viruses from circulation. Wow, isn't that something we could use in these last few years? Of course. They act as biological vacuum cleaners, eliminating impurities, foreign proteins, immune complexes, and harmful microorganisms from bloodstream and tissues. Enzymes, guess what? Also aid in destruction of cancer cells. I'll show you some of those examples. Enzymes cause enhancement of immune cells to kill bacteria, viruses, woohoo, nice, molds and fungi. Enzymes break down immune complexes which block the immune cells. They accelerate volume and fluidity of blood flow. This is very important because when you keep blood rheology moving, guess what? It's hard for a pathogen to adhere to a surface. It's hard for a pathogen to create biofilm if it can't adhere to a surface. So when the blood becomes stagnant, it is an environment for a pathogen to adhere to the surface and start creating a biofilm and increasing an immune reaction and increasing inflammation. Enzymes such as bromelain modulate arachidonic pathway, which has to do with inflammation. Enzymes activate alpha-2 macroglobulins. This is also called the cytokine catcher. Cytokine catcher, that is something that we could definitely use in these last couple of years that we've been plagued with something that increases the cytokine storm. Enzymes also break down and remove necrotic debris in wounds, and they reduce acute phase reactants like CRP and fibrinogen. Okay, so let's go a little bit over how these guys perform. So the first bullet that I mentioned, systemic enzyme therapy, has been shown to overcome the cytokine storm or immunosuppression seen in infections and to salvage the host immune system. Okay, so you got to understand the outcome in an infection is dependent on a multitude of factors such as genes, nutritional status of the host, virulence of infecting organism, and time duration of the infection. So a favorable outcome ensues when the host's immune response is sufficient enough to arrest the march of the infecting organism into it. Whereas an inadequate or a deficient immune response could prove detrimental. It could prove the opposite, say. So not only a hypo, but a hyper immune response has also been shown to be harmful, okay? Such suboptimal responses characterize severe, advanced, or resistant infections. So the battle between the host immunity and the organism leads to a lot of molecular morbidity and mortality. So systemic enzymes seem to aid tremendously in taming this wilderness and optimizing the immune response. Enzymes are adaptogenic, so they seek to restore a steady state to the body. Okay, so for example, when the immune system is running low or hypoactive, we become susceptible to infectious disease. When the immune system is hyper, okay, and too high, then the system creates antibodies that attacks its own tissues. as are seen in autoimmune diseases. Okay, so therapeutic dosing of oral administered systemic enzymes will tone down immune function and eat away at the antibodies the immune system is making to attack its body's own tissues. So when the immune system is running too low, the enzymes increase immune response, producing more natural killer cells and improving the efficiency of the white blood cells, all leading to improved immunity. Okay, so this is very important. Okay, when the immune system is running low, enzymes have the ability to reduce and increase pro-inflammatory cytokines as the body needs. Okay, when the system is running low, enzymes have the ability to help potentiate macrophage activity. Okay, increased macrophage activity, okay, leads to better killing power to offensive microorganisms. They have the ability to quench inflammation. Okay, so when too many antibodies are produced, when there's a cytokine storm, these digestive enzymes, these proteolytic enzymes, are able to reduce that inflammation by breaking down those pro-inflammatory cytokines. And I'm going to show you how this was proven through a study performed here at Baylor University. So at Baylor University, they took 29 college students and they elicited an immune reaction through a rigorous exercise regimen, creating inflammation, because as you know, intense exercise also creates inflammation. And when you have inflammation, you have certain pro-inflammatory cytokines such as TNF alpha, which is right here, interleukin 6, interleukin 12, and the COX-2 enzyme and interleukin 1 beta. They go up, they increase in any time there is an inflammatory reaction in the body. So with the Baylor study, they created inflammation through an intensive exercise regimen to these 29 participants. They divided them into two groups. One group, they dosed with proteolytic enzymes, and the other group was given a placebo. Okay, so what we see here is T1 is baseline. They measured these pro-inflammatory cytokines at baseline. Okay, T2 is another measurement pre-workout on the 21st day. Okay, so they measured baseline, day 0. They supplemented for 21 days. And at the 21st day, they measured these pro-inflammatory cytokines again. Then they put all these participants through an intense exercise regimen to increase their inflammatory reaction. And then they measured again 3 hours post-exercise, 24 hours post-exercise, and 48 hours post-exercise, these pro-inflammatory cytokines to see how the proteolytic enzymes, which is here in blue, performed against the placebo, which is here in gray. And as you can see here for TNF alpha, this figure shows that this proteolytic enzyme allowed the synthesis and secretion of TNF alpha to occur immediately post-exercise. So see here, post-exercise, the control group, this pro-inflammatory cytokine went up, and in the dosed group, this pro-inflammatory cytokine also went up after exercise, and that we need to happen. Remember, inflammation is natural. You don't want to turn off inflammation. You want to have inflammation on because it's your friend. It helps you repair. It helps you regenerate. It helps you recover. So you don't want to turn off the inflammatory response. What you want to do, however, is quench that inflammatory reaction so that it is not prolonged and chronic. Because when it's prolonged and chronic, that's when it can become fatal, as in the cytokine storm we saw in severe COVID-19 patients. Okay, so in this study here for TNF alpha, we saw that the dosed group started reducing that TNF alpha. compared to the placebo group. After 24 hours, boom, that TNF alpha increased sharply. Okay, so that right there is uncontrolled inflammation. This here, through the proteolytic enzyme, is controlled, modulated inflammation, which is what we want in any clinical presentation, whether it's an extreme exercise routine as here, or if it's in a COVID-19 severe cytokine storm presentation. Okay, so these are things that can support the immune system. Now, keep in mind, I'm not saying that these proteolytic enzymes treat, cure, or diagnose any disease. What I'm saying is that there's evidence that shows that these proteolytic enzymes help support in quenching inflammation in at the cellular level. Okay, and this is evidence of it right here in this Baylor study where they showed TNF alpha was reduced in the dosed group compared to the placebo group that had a sharp increase after 48 hours. Okay, next marker of inflammation, next pro-inflammatory cytokine that the Baylor study tested was interleukin-1 beta. Interleukin-1 beta also is a pro-inflammatory cytokine that needs to go up because remember, inflammation is natural. We don't want to shut off the immune system, but what we want to do is help modulate the immune system. And in this graph, we can see the rise in interleukin-1 beta immediately post-exercise for the protease group, which was 24%, was less than half that seen in the placebo group, which was 62%, and demonstrating effective control of inflammation. Interleukin-6 is also a pro-inflammatory cytokine. And also in this graph, we see that proteolytic enzyme group had overall lower serum concentrations of interleukin-6 than the placebo group. This interleukin-12, also a pro-inflammatory cytokine. And for this inflammatory cytokine, looking at the study results post-exercise to 48 hours, the levels of interleukin-12 dropped 63% in the proteolytic enzyme group compared to a 16% increase in the placebo group. So the dose group, you can see a rise in interleukin-12 after the exercise, which is what we expect. But then 3 hours, 24 hours, 48 hours post-exercise, that pro-inflammatory cytokine interleukin-12 started going down, whereas the placebo group had a sharp increase after 24 hours. Another enzyme that was tested was this COX-2 enzyme, which we all know plays a role in inflammation. Okay, and here you also want to know that these levels appear more controlled in the proteolytic group, more controlled synthesis and production than the uncontrolled graph of the placebo group post-exercise, whereas the placebo group showed a 41% increase in COX-2, overall increase. Okay, the second bullet that I showed in one of the first slides is that enzymes cleave antigenic surface protein of organisms and digest their outer coat. Now, this is important. What we see here is a SARS-CoV-2 structure with an E protein, the S protein, the M protein, but this also contains some glycoproteins. Okay, so depending on the previous host of this microorganism, it's going to have some sugars and some lipids on its coat in order to hide itself from the immune system and run away from it. In this slide, I'm going to show you how enzymes cleave the antigenic surface protein of organisms and digest their outer coat. And here we see in an electron microscope results of HIV virus before and after exposure to bromelain enzyme. Okay, notable morphological changes observed when HIV virus is exposed in vitro to bromelain. So slide A, this slide right here, shows how the virus pointed by these red arrows have a perfect circular shape, as you can see here. Whereas in slide B, when exposed to bromelain, it shows the virus shapes is now distorted, is irregular, and became smaller. And the reason being is that this bromelain enzyme starts digesting those surface proteins of this virus. And here is the reference of this study that was performed. I'm going to show you another example of how enzymes cleave the antigenic surface protein of organisms. This was changes in nucleic acid concentration after treatment with bromelain from different patients expressing the human papillomavirus. That in vitro human papillomavirus was exposed to bromelain, and they tested by way of PCR in order to detect the presence of human papillomavirus DNA. Now, the outcome presented in this figure right here clearly shows that there was a substantial increase in concentration of nucleic acid following treatment with bromelain compared to the control. Okay, so this is the control. Okay, it has the DNA, and this is the patient after treated. Control, treated. So as you can see, the increase of the DNA concentrations from both samples was possible because the capsid of the human papillomavirus and some of the membrane of the cell was degraded, which allowed the DNA of the virus to leak into the solution tested and be picked up by the PCR. Okay, so that's evidence right there. Another thing holds true for biofilm. Okay, according to the National Institute for Health, more than 75% of microbial infections that occur in the body are promoted by formation and persistence of biofilm. These biofilms are everywhere, and nearly all species of microorganisms, including viruses, are able to adhere to surfaces and or to each other to form biofilms. Now, remember I told you in the beginning, this is important that digestive enzymes increase blood rheology, increases the circulation. It keeps the blood moving and flowing. And this is important for this reason alone, because these bacteria, fungi, yeast, algae, protozoa, and viruses are able to adhere to surfaces. Once they adhere to a surface, they accumulate and they cling on to one another, and they start producing biofilms. If you keep the blood flowing, these microorganisms cannot attach. They cannot adhere to the surface. So their biofilm formation is hampered. So biofilm components, remember that these biofilms are composed by self-produced matrix. These are extracellular polymeric substances. Now, antibiotics do nothing to destroy these extracellular polymeric substances. But when you add enzymes to it, it will actually potentiate the antibiotic and make it more effective. Why? Because the enzymes are able to digest polysaccharides, proteins, nucleic acids, lipids, and these membrane vesicles. And by degrading that, you're opening up the biofilm, allowing the antibiotic to then penetrate, allowing the immune system to then penetrate and kill whatever is inside the biofilm. Okay, so that's important. Like I said, they degrade the EPS. They have hydrolytic activity on the polysaccharides, proteins, and lipids. They enhance the action of antibiotics, and they have anti-inflammatory properties, as I showed you with the Baylor study. And they attack the inhabitants of the biofilm by helping the immune system. Okay, so with supplemental enzymes, you're actually hitting this pathology in different ways. Remember, you're degrading the EPS, hydrolyzing the cellular components, enhancing the antibiotic effect, quenching inflammation, and allowing the immune system to get access to the internal residents, ultimately attacking the pathogens themselves. Okay, all this leads to improved clinical outcomes and patient recovery, which is what we're ultimately looking for. Okay, they reduce number and activity of receptors for pathogen on host cells. Thus, pathogen attachment is hampered. Remember, if a pathogen cannot attach to a surface in the host, the infectivity will decrease. And in this study, you can read this, the attachment of E. coli to its intestinal receptor is very complex, but ultimately it leads to a net efflux of chloride ions and water into the lumen of the small intestine, and that causes diarrhea. Here we see that oral administration of bromelain helps in eliminating that receptor that binds to the E. coli. And if the E. coli cannot bind to its receptor, then the diarrhea can no longer be activated. Okay, so the results extend our initial observations, as you can read here, and confirm that bromelain can inactivate the enterotoxigenic E. coli receptors in vivo, and also show that bromelain protects against ETEC-induced diarrhea. Given the similarities in the mechanism of pathogenesis of ETEC that affect piglets and humans, these data suggest that bromelain may be of clinical use to protect against human ETEC infections. Okay, so this is just showing how the bromelain it degraded the receptor and prevented the E. coli to attach itself to the pig intestine. And if it couldn't attach itself, then it could no longer perform the net efflux of chloride ions and water into the lumen, causing diarrhea. So that's pretty much what this slide is telling us. They detoxify blood and remove viruses from circulation. Okay, they act as biological vacuum cleaners, eliminating impurities, foreign proteins, immune complexes, and harmful microorganisms from bloodstream and tissues. Now, this greatly decreases the inflammatory response, and this allows the normal immune functions to operate at a much healthier level. Number 5, enzymes aid in destruction of cancer cells, okay, partly by inhibiting what I went over, the NF-kappa beta inflammatory cascade, if you remember that diagram with the NF-kappa beta. With the Baylor study, I showed you how COX-2 enzyme, which is also involved in the inflammatory cascade, how it was diminished by proteolytic enzymes. And prostaglandin E2 is also inhibited by bromelain, okay? So bromelain markedly has an in vivo anti-tumor activity for these following cell lines: leukemia, sarcoma, Ehrlich acidic tumor, Lewis lung carcinoma, mammary adenocarcinoma. And in these studies, intraperitoneal administration of bromelain after 24 hours of tumor cell inoculation resulted in tumor regression. And you can see that here in this reference, okay? We go further here. Enzymes cause enhancement of immune cells to kill bacteria, viruses, molds, and fungi. Okay. Bromelain, papain, and amylase increase proliferation of peripheral blood mononuclear cells, production of IL-6 and IL-1 beta, GM-CSF, TNF-alpha, and interferon alpha production. This is important. Macrophage activity is enhanced up to 700%. And phagocytosis is also accelerated. Just with these two bullets right here, macrophage activity being enhanced by 700% and phagocytosis accelerated, we can take care of bacteria, viruses, molds, and fungi. So these are two very important aspects of proteolytic enzyme functions. Enzymes break down immune complexes, which block the immune cells. Now, remember, in things such as rheumatoid arthritis or any autoimmune disease, a lot of antibodies are created to our own tissue. A lot of times, your body cannot eliminate these antigen antibody complexes, and they get sequestered in joints and tissue. Well, that creates more inflammation, and that creates pain. And the proteolytic enzymes, what it does is it helps cleave off that antigen antibody complex so that it can be taken out of the tissue and taken away by the circulation into our eliminating organs through our urine, our colon, and our liver, and it could be detoxified. So that's pretty much what we see here. Also, when this happens in the early phase, there may be worsening of the situation due to the release of immune complexes fixed in tissues into the blood. This is what we call a Herxheimer reaction. And that's when a patient, after going on enzyme therapy, feels worse than improved. But that's only temporary. That's while you start detoxifying tissues of antigen antibody immune complexes. When you pull those out of tissues, out of joints, and into the circulation, it could give you that Herxheimer reaction, which makes you feel a little ill. But that's only temporary. What I like to tell my patients is to rest, drink a lot of fluids, a lot of water, meditate, pray, and just relax. It's going to be over shortly. Okay, they accelerate the volume and fluidity of blood flow. This is important. Remember that when the blood is stagnant, when the circulation is very slow, inflammation can ensue because pathogens can adhere to surfaces, creating biofilm and creating more of an infection. Okay, enzymes help reduce fibrinogen, which decreases volume and fluidity of blood flow. Okay, they enhance conversion of plasminogen to plasmin, which degrades fibrin. They inhibit fibrin from forming protective matrix around the injured area, as the matrix inhibits tissue drainage, promotes edema, and blocks circulation of blood flow. And enzymes also prevent aggregation of blood platelets. What the net result here is improved volume and fluidity of blood flow, which is what we need in any condition for good health. Enzymes such as bromelain modulate the arachidonic pathway. Okay, so non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs inhibit the enzyme cyclooxygenase, resulting in a decrease of both pro and anti-inflammatory prostaglandins. In contrast, enzymes may selectively inhibit the pro-inflammatory cytokines and shift to a ratio to a more favorable anti-inflammatory cytokine. Okay, because as you know, there's pro-inflammatory proteins and anti-inflammatory proteins. So you kind of make a shift from the pro-inflammatory to the anti-inflammatory by way of modulating the arachidonic pathway. Enzymes activate the alpha-2 macroglobulin. This is also called the cytokine catcher, okay, which this is the alpha-2 macroglobulin right here depicted in this picture. This is a carrier protein, also known or also called an anti-protease. It's not that it inhibits a protease, it's that it catches the protease once it goes into the blood circulation. That's why by supplementing with proteases that go into the circulation, you're not going to elicit an immune inflammatory reaction, because once it enters, this alpha-2 macroglobulin catches the protease, puts it inside of it, and protects it from being recognized by the immune system as an intruder. So the immune system lets it go. And as you can see, it has spaces where the protease is exposed to the surroundings, and it could still perform its proteolytic activity. Now, this alpha-2 macroglobulin not only catches these proteases, but when it's activated by a protease, it can also promote faster clearance of cytokines, such as TNF-alpha. The stimulus for expression of the adhesion molecule is reduced. This assists in minimizing the heightened inflammatory response. That's why it's called the cytokine catcher. After the proteolytic enzyme activates it and makes it into the active form called the fast form, it carries this protease around. It can also attach to pro-inflammatory cytokines such as TNF-alpha, and hence the name cytokine catcher. In a condition where there is severe cytokine storm, you take supplemental proteases, activates alpha-2 macroglobulin, it starts becoming the cytokine catcher you desperately need in a severe cytokine storm. That is wonderful. Wonderful benefit. We're almost done. Enzymes also break down and remove necrotic debris in wounds. Okay, now the beauty of it is that it removes necrotic debris without hindering, without damaging good tissue, okay? And it only acts on the tissues which lack the alpha-1 antitrypsin plasmatic antiprotease that inhibits proteolysis in healthy tissues. Okay, so what that means is enzymes break down fibrin deposits and remove necrotic debris and excess fibrin from the bloodstream. So this accelerates the healing process, okay, due to its unique property of dissolving dead tissue surrounding the injured area without harming living tissue. Okay, enzymes are effective at breaking down a variety of devitalized tissue and necrotic tissue substrates over a wide range pH range. So they don't harm healthy tissue. They only debride necrotic tissue. And this was a question that was posed to me in terms of taking proteolytic enzymes when you have certain gastric ulcers. People thought that proteolytic enzyme was going to bore a bigger hole at that ulcer site because it eats away tissue, but it does not eat healthy tissue. It only cleans out the necrotic debris and does not eat away at the healthy tissue. Okay, enzymes are very specific to its substrate, to the thing it acts on. Okay, so you don't have to worry about that. They reduce acute phase reactants like CRP and fibrinogen. Now, CRP and fibrinogen, they increase in acute inflammatory conditions. Okay, so both CRP and fibrinogen, they've been correlated with a significant increased risk of future heart attacks. Like I said, both are acute phase reactants and they have sharp rise in states of inflammation or tissue damage, including low-grade inflammation in healthy individuals. So even if you don't have a clinical presentation or a full-blown condition, if there is elevated levels of CRP and fibrinogen, that can put you in increased risk for a future cardiovascular event. And I did a little observatory trial with proteolytic enzymes and these two pro-inflammatory markers, CRP and fibrinogen. So I took some patients and I measured their CRP at baseline, 6 weeks, and then 12 weeks. That's why 1, 2, and 3. So 3 times I measured their CRP. And baseline in 6 weeks and at 12 weeks. I also measured their fibrinogen. As you can see here, proteolytic enzymes, 3 capsules 4 times a day gave me a CRP in the beginning from 20.9. In 6 weeks, that CRP went down to 12. And in 12 weeks, that CRP went down to 7.5. For fibrinogen, this patient's fibrinogen went from 403 baseline, 314 6 weeks, and after 12 weeks, 311. This patient, their CRP went from 12.3 at baseline to 0.5 to 0.8 after 12 weeks, and their fibrinogen went from 439 to 297. This other participant, their CRP went from 2.5 to 0.3, and their fibrinogen went from 342 to 261. So as you can see, with these participants that I gave 4 capsules 3 times a day, we showed some improvement in these markers. And I'm getting a question here. Let me see if I can go. Is it at the chat? Let me see here. There's some questions being. Okay. Yes. Okay. Michael B. Which available orally taken enzymes products or product combo by Texzymes may have an effect on blocking the breakdown of proteins into 3 chymotrypsin-like protease that is essential to viral replication ability in cells? If you should have any information on it. Okay. Blocking the breakdown of proteins into 3 chymotrypsin-like protease. Okay, so 3 chymotrypsin-like protease is a protease produced by viruses to help in its ability to replicate in cells. The proteolytic enzymes given by Techzymes, okay, has nothing to do with that viral produced protease, which helps its viral replication in cells. The supplemental proteases that Techzymes offers is different mechanisms because of its substrate specificity. Okay, there are two different enzymes. Okay, the 3CL protease and the Techzyme protease do two different, completely different functions. The Techzyme protease is going to help in degrading those structural proteins found on the outer capsid, as I showed you in one of the slides, where the HPV and HIV viruses were degraded because of their capsids were hydrolyzed by bromelain. Okay, so these are two very different proteases that we're talking about in this question. And I could elaborate on that a little bit more later. So let me go ahead and finish this. So step one, what do? Diet and lifestyle. We have to have accountability for patients in terms of what they're putting in their mouth. It has to be whole foods, fresh, organic, nutrient dense, antioxidant rich, a lot of fiber, a lot of water. Lifestyle, they'd have to be chemical free. You have to exercise, rest, relax, read, pray, meditate, positive self-talk. All these things play a role. Okay, well then we go to step two, which is enzyme therapy. I've already listed all the benefits of enzyme therapy when it comes to proper nutrition, especially in these times of increased immune challenges with these viral loads that are going around. Techzyme has the digestive formula, which you take with every meal in order for you to digest completely all aspects of the meal. It contains enzymes for carbohydrates, for proteins, and for lipids, and for every component of fruits and vegetables. By digesting completely all those foods, you're going to prevent undigested proteins to enter into the circulation, eliciting an immune reaction like I showed you on the video. A proteolytic formula we like to give in between meals on an empty stomach. Why? Because if you have an empty stomach, if there's no food to break down in the intestines, then the proteases will be absorbed intact into the circulation to give you that systemic benefit, to quench inflammation in the system, to increase blood rheology, to aid the immune system, and do all those things that I just talked about previously. And then, of course, a probiotic. We know what the wonderful benefits of probiotics to support our intestinal flora, strengthen our immune system, and do the 100,000s of functions it does for our body. Enzyme therapy, again, the use of these digestive enzymes will enhance your digestion and absorption of nutrients, improve blood flow, support detox, and manage inflammation. Those are important in any condition that walks through your door. Like I said, whether it's diabetes, cancer, autoimmune, or any viral load, fungal load, or anything that the patient is dealing with. So you take a digestive enzyme before, during, and after meals to aid in the proper digestion, absorption, and utilization of proteins, carbohydrates, fats, and this is necessary to sustain health and vitality. Digestive enzymes by Techzymes will give you this nutrient bioavailability, cellular energy and vitality, strong immunity, reduces oxidative stress, and reduces food intolerance. And as you can see, Techzymes has everything in that formula in order for you to digest everything that's on a plate. It has amylase, phytase, glucoamylase, alpha-galactosidase, macerase, beta-glucanase, lactase, pectinase. These are all the components found in fruits and vegetables. and in every meal that you eat. It also helps with wellness and prevention, inability to digest fat, carbohydrates, and proteins. People that have their gallbladder removed and can no longer process fats, the lipases in digest from Techzymes will help in processing those fats. It helps in cardiovascular disease because remember, it quenches inflammation. It helps with bloating, indigestion, and gastroesophageal reflux disease. Helps with obesity, hormone imbalance, pancreatic insufficiency, most definitely, and all chronic health challenges. Number 2, you take a proteolytic enzyme, like I said, in between meals to support adequate blood circulation, removal of metabolic waste, and modulate the immune system. So this proteolytic enzyme by Techzymes contains a proteolytic blend that has bromelain and peptidases. And that's what you're going to need in order to break down pro-inflammatory cytokines, in order for you to break down undigested proteins, in order for you to break down immune complexes, structural proteins on pathogens, helps with circulation, nutrient delivery, immune modulation. Remember, it decreases pro-inflammatory cytokines, delivery of immune cells. Remember what I said, it potentiates macrophage activity by 700%, reduces inflammation, increases circulation, and removal of toxins. Application of these proteolytic enzymes, well, you can use them for any of these and more. Remember, the common denominator in all of these conditions is inflammation. And when you're quenching and reducing inflammation, you're going to be able to support any and all conditions that walk through our door, no matter what your specialty is, whether you're an endocrinologist, internist, whether you are a cardiovascular doctor, whatever specialty you have, you can use these proteolytic enzymes in your practice because proteolytic enzymes help quench inflammation, it modulates the immune system, it breaks down immune complexes, it reduces pro-inflammatory cytokines, and all of that is favorable for any type of patient that walks through our door. The third is, again, take a probiotic at bedtime to maintain good microflora within the GI tract, promote healthy elimination, and further assist with digestive support. And probiotics, we all know everything it does. It also produces some of its own digestive enzyme. Now, you have to understand, bacteria, viruses, fungus, they also produce enzymes. That's how they are able to survive, by producing enzymes. As a matter of fact, the enzymes that you are going to supplement with, they are from, a lot of it from Aspergillus niger, which is a fungus. They're produced by the species. We extract just the enzyme and we capsule it because those enzymes have proteolytic properties and anti-inflammatory properties, okay? Other applications for probiotics, we all know this, dysbiosis, intestinal bloating, constipation, IBD, weakened immunity, infection, and additional support for enzyme delivery with nutrition. We also have some others that Techzyme carries, Gastro and Gastrozyme. Usually when you see a zyme behind the name, it's a more gentle form of the professional line. So for those sensitive individuals that really are sensitive to whatever they eat, I usually start them with a zyme product. So this Gastrozyme is more gentle. This Gastro is more potent. And what this does, it is a polysaccharolytic enzymes for carbohydrate digestion. It has herbs for digestion and healing. It has proteolytic enzymes for protein digestion. It has antioxidants for inflammation. And it has lipolytic enzymes for fat. So it also has herbs that create mucilaginous content in the intestinal lining. That protective cap over the intestinal lining, it promotes through the stimulating goblet cells, it produces mucilage in order to protect that intestinal lining. So that's pretty much what gastro does. Application for this gastro product: heartburn, indigestion, gastroesophageal reflux disease, gastritis, esophagitis, diarrhea. Okay, this is what we use it for. And if you can see the label here, it contains proteolytic blends, polysaccharolytic blend, and it also contains marshmallow root, papaya, ginger, turmeric, gotu kola, fennel, artichoke, aloe vera, Irish moss, things that soothe the intestinal lining, therefore aiding in patients with heartburn, indigestion, gastritis, esophagitis. Lipozyme, okay, this is a blend of amylase and lipase and protease. And this lipase aids in the digestion of fats. It also has in it proteases and amylases, which helps with carbohydrates and proteins. It also promotes absorption of essential fatty acids, and it's an additional support for cardiovascular health and weight reduction. It also is applied for gallbladder stress, improved absorption of essential fatty acids. As you can see, cardiovascular health, obesity, metabolic syndrome, diabetes, just to name a few. Protease IFC, it's a protease formula. It has all the proteases that you need, but it also has some antioxidants like vitamin A, vitamin C, vitamin E, and zinc and selenium. So IFC for inflammation, it's again a proteolytic blend with antioxidants. Okay, remember that inflammation is a common denominator in nearly all illnesses and disease. Proteases and antioxidants regulate inflammation anywhere or in the body. The application for this IFC: autoimmune disorders, muscle aches, pains, injuries. I use this a lot in my personal injury patients and my sports-related injury patients, patients recovering from surgery. As a matter of fact, myself had ACL repair on my knee, and I used a lot of protease IFC in order to quench that inflammation. Recovery period, you will notice, will be shortened because less inflammation, better recovery of damaged tissue. You can also use it for cardiovascular health, skin disorders like eczema, psoriasis, rosacea, et cetera, et cetera. This Balenzyme is for metabolic support. Okay, it contains chromium and nettles for blood sugar balance. It has an enzyme blend, also contains Garcinia cambogia and plantain for appetite suppressor. And these nutrients right here, bladderwrack, cordyceps, fenugreek, to support the pancreas, liver, and digestion. And it also has enzymes for improved delivery. The applications for this Balenzyme is going to be fat digestion, appetite control, weight loss, glucose, blood sugar balance, pancreas, liver, and digestion. I have just a few more slides here and we will be done. Supercellzyme, it's an all-natural whole food source vitamin and minerals. It comes from wheat germ, which is one of the most nutrient-dense food sources available, and it also has enzymes for delivery and absorption of ingredients. So the application for this Supercellzyme, whenever you have a poor diet or a limited diet whereby you can't eat enough of the nutrients needed on a day-to-day basis, this Supercellzyme contains all the vitamins and minerals necessary for malnutrition, low energy, and stressful lifestyle. Well, this wraps up my presentation. Thank you very much for your patience, and I hope you're still awake and I didn't bore you to death here. So if we have any questions, I will feel free to go ahead and pose them, and I will try to address them to the best of my ability. Thank you very much.